our dog got loose one time, and I go track her down. We've had people like UPS show up. It's people just it's really weird. So
okay, so you're used to editing all that stuff out or just rolling with it?
Just we usually roll with it or something like that. So it just doesn't really we're not very professional, Tammy. That's what I'm trying to say without being like it's totally okay. But
it's not that you're real. It's about branding it. You're just really real.
Just very authentic. That's where I'm coming from, Tammy. That's what. Man. So, well, thank you for being here. And one of the first questions we ask is, how did you get involved with the web? What was your first contact with the web, that'd be kind of just
like going back to the very beginning.
Yeah.
So I'm really old. So my first contact with the web was like IRC. So I was really into IRC back in the early 90s. So, and then, the World Wide Web came along and I was like, oh, whoa, you can see stuff and read words and stuff. It's not just people talking to each other. So, yeah, that was it for me. I am back in I guess it was 95. My husband and a friend and I actually started a kind of pop culture, like sort of Slate before there was Slate, and they came along about a year after us. And it's you can't even find it on the any kind of archive, but it was called Uber. We owned the domain uber.com. And we sold it around 98 because we all went our kind of our separate ways and we sold it. We made small thousands of dollars. The last I heard when it changed hands, it was worth many millions of dollars. So yeah, that's my claim to internet fame and
a little
internet
bit
history. Yeah,
a little bit more scratched now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also like, oh man, we have a whole podcast about losing domain names and giving them up and what they mean, because I think they're names for projects that'll never see the light of day. They're like wishes that you make.
Yeah, I own about 20 different domains for like blogs I want to start, and I have some like half-baked started blogs where I haven't published any posts yet. But it's fun. It's just nice. It's like you have an idea, and like you have an idea for a great domain name, and then you go and find it, and it's available. So you grab it. So
ideas like that are just so intoxicating. Like, oh yeah, the possibilities.
Mm-hmm. And nobody's taken this URL yet. Like, it's still available. Like, obviously, there's a market for this. So yeah.
Oh man, yeah, totally understand. Okay, so that's pretty funny. Uber. I wish I could read Uber in '98. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Oh no, but like 95 to 98. Yeah, those are the golden years for Uber.com. I'll tell you.
I guess I sort of want to get into performance, which is because you are talking about web performance now. But I do want to talk about, I found something that you in the web, and I have no idea what the context it is in terms of time. So maybe you could put it into context if it's something you just did recently or a while back. But in my research, it says that you invented the activity impact score. It's the metric or system.
I can't take any credit for inventing it at all. I wrote about it. I'm kind of like the amplifier.
Okay.
So some people at SOASTA specifically, so our founder, Ken Gardner, co-founder, he is really, really into data science and data analytics. And so he worked with one of our data scientists, Ben Polovic, to do basically, we had done something called the conversion impact score, which was also a Ken and Ben production that measures the impact of load time on relative conversion rate. So which is really neat. And then they had the idea, well, what would be a good metric to look at for media sites where they don't care about conversions? And so they kind of struck on session length as a really good metric. And so the activity impact score measures the relative impact of load time on session length. So it's pretty cool. I can talk about that for the whole rest of our conversation if you want, or you can just cut me off and ask me some questions.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, just talk about like I guess describe it, and then so it's like the load length, like the load of bringing loading the website versus how long they stay on the website? Is that?
Yeah, so it's looking at median load times across different page groups. So, for example, you might have a group that's articles, or you might have another group that is around all of the different buckets that your content goes in. So, like news, politics, sports, etc. And so people who use RUM tools, when they tag their pages, they tag them to fall into these different buckets, these page groups. And so we look at the median load time for these page groups, and then we correlate that. And the algorithm alone is, well, actually the summary document that just describes the algorithm is 6 pages long. And then so just to give you a little backstory there, there's some very, very meaty data science going on here. And then, so there's a lot that goes into it, but the really simple version is, it just correlates to session length. So the takeaway is that, for example, a media site, and we have several media sites that are SOASTA customers that want a metric like this. If you're a media site, you can look at a graph that shows the activity impact scores for all your different page groups as well alongside the load times for those different page groups. And so it's really interesting because without the activity impact scores, you can fall into a few different fallacies. You can if you're a performance engineer, you just look at what are the slowest pages on your site and you tackle those first. Or if you are pretty much anybody, you focus on your homepage because everybody thinks or knows or believes that their homepage performance is the most important thing on their site. But what activity impact scoring does is let you know that, well, actually maybe homepage isn't that big a deal for your users. Like maybe if you make those pages faster or slower, it doesn't really have that much of an impact on session length. But maybe it's some other group of pages that you didn't even realize were affecting people's behavior on your site.
Okay, yeah. So that's just, that makes so much sense. So like we can focus so much on overall performance of a website and page and getting it down, but you have to look at the demographics of people who are coming to your site and the different areas in which they are interacting with your website, and then kind of just is that like a fair assessment of the activity?
Kind of, yeah. It's sort of just if somebody's coming to your site, say, and they're using, the nice thing, so just back up a little bit, just to clarify, the thing about activity impact scoring is it's totally based on your own users and your own site. So there's a lot of stuff out there, like case studies about this retail site and that media site and so on and so on. But ultimately, it's really easy to discount those things if you're a site owner, because you say my users are different, my site is different. So what it lets you do is understand how your particular, your entire 100% of your users historically, because you're looking at potentially billions of page views, billions of beacons worth of data, kind of going into the system, and it's a bit of like predictive analytics. It's saying that in the past, when these pages were faster or slower, it didn't really affect session length as much as these other pages that were when they were faster or slower. So it's just that variability. So so you can then look at your data and prioritize performance optimization for your pages. So again, it lets people get on the same page and stops you from having this like kind of straw man argument, which happens a lot, even in ostensibly data driven environments where everybody has their pet idea and kind of sticks with that.
Right. Yeah. Well, because you always get that whole like it depends argument when you go to things. It's like, well, that's your case study is awesome, or your solution was great, but it depends on XYZ. So we actually talked about this a little bit with conferences and talks in the last episode, but yeah, I could totally see how like just focusing on your own users, which is what everyone usually says at a conference anyway, just to focus on your own users for your data and what they're doing. So yeah, so I totally understand that's a great approach for doing that. Okay, I do want to leave this topic for a second and just back up a little bit, and we talked a little bit about history, about how you had Uber and then you let go of Uber. But how do you go from Uber 98 to
performance?
To performance, yeah, that's like
it's a big leap. So I did a bunch of things, like most people. So probably the bulk of the early part of my web career was working. I was a partner in a web consulting firm that's based in Vancouver called Habanero. They're still great. They're still there. And I was there for 5 years and helped pioneer at the time. So this would have been like 98 to 2000 and whatever 5 years after that is, 2003, something like that. My years are blurry as I get older. I just think in decades now. And what we did that was really interesting there was there wasn't a lot, like people were talking about usability. It was a bit of a buzzword, but nobody was, at least on the consulting side, was really doing much to actually measure it. And so we developed I think one of the first usability test labs in Vancouver, right in our office, to test sites for our clients and just do real user testing. And I'm a little bit like, in hindsight, like looking back on it, I'd be a little embarrassed comparing like what a test environment back then was to what a test environment now is. But at the time, we were totally bleeding edge, man. And just the idea.
So describe that for us. Paint us a picture, Tammy.
I will paint you a picture of whatever was like the hottest Mac at the time on, in a really slick little gas town Vancouver office with like some exposed brick and all those great things that we loved back then. And actually calling up real users. Like we had this like network, this database of people that we would talk to and bring them in that were, and we slice and dice in different demographics. And we would just give them tasks to do. So we would like come up with like, well, what are the use cases based on, what we had determined with the client. And we would just watch them. And we would, and it was really hard because they were like basically working with prototypes that we had built, like, kind of on screen. And it really laid bare how much what we thought we were doing that was helping people still sucked. I mean, kind of, it was good in a lot of ways, but, I think that usability testing, I think it's still like trying to sell customers back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the idea that they needed to do user testing. Once they did it once, they were sold. They saw the difference between the pre-test version and the post-test version of the site, and they saw that it was more successful. And after that, they were sold into doing it over and over again with everything. But I see that even now in 2016, people, site owners are still not doing usability testing, which makes me feel crazy because to me, what drove me crazy and the people that I worked with at Habanero crazy was this idea that that we knew that we just like we had like this access to the usability gods, and we could just say what was going to work for users, and getting into these kind of straw man conversations where everybody is kind of like, well, I think what users would like is this, and I think users prefer left-hand navigation, and I think users prefer top, And so just the idea of like just cutting down on a lot of that conversation and a lot of the opinionating and actually having real results, real data to work with. So it was really a huge privilege to be able to do that early on and to have that experience. And then from there, I actually got into working for CBC, doing web production on some large web properties they had, and then kind of made the jump back into the user experience side of things, working for a company called Strange Loop, which they had some really great solutions around front-end optimization, so actually doing stuff to make pages faster. And when I went to work for Strange Loop, what they knew they wanted to do was, and this would have been 2009, where they knew that the intersection between performance and user experience was a really big deal. There were a few little case studies that had come out here and there around it at like velocity conferences in a couple of previous years, but they really wanted to amplify that, do original research, and actually make a lot of noise around that. And so they hired me to be the noisemaker because I had that background, but I had no experience in performance whatsoever. Okay. So, yeah.
Cool. So they just tapped you like, hey, we need someone to look into this, and you have the background available
to write about it in a non-technical way.
Oh, nice.
because they knew they wanted to speak to, and I talk about them in the past tense because they've since been acquired by another company called Radware. So the technology still is out there. It's very healthy and flourishing and all that. I just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, they wanted to talk about it to a non-technical audience. So so a lot of the way that I have always written and how I continue to write is just, I want anybody to be able to kind of get the message. And yeah.
Right. And I think I think a good example of that probably would be the Super Bowl graphic, right? That's out there.
Yeah. So I make a lot of graphics just because it's really fun, and there's like some really good software out there that lets you do it and have some fun with that. So it's funny because first and foremost I'm a writer, but I don't actually think that people read a lot of the things that I write from top to bottom. Right. So I kind of learned how to make some graphics because at least people will look at the graphics, right. And and then hopefully that'll tempt them into scanning the rest of the article.
Okay. Well, yeah, I hope you don't mind if I just pull this one and I have examples.
Yeah,
I think it's great. Yeah, Super Bowl, pop culture, one of America's biggest exports, good or bad, out there. And so just explain what you're doing with the Super Bowl.
Okay, wait a second. I need to pull it up as well so that we're on the same page. Wait a second.
Okay. I know that's a gotcha question. Like,
no, it's okay. I can.
Just you made in February. Just like, yeah, which is.
I can't remember things from February. I can't remember what I had.
I didn't mean that as a mean joke. I meant that as like I can't remember things from yesterday. So it's like, oh my gosh. So sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's okay. So I'm just pulling it up here, and so yeah. So the one of the fun things at SOASTA is that we're always asking questions about about how does performance affect people just in everything. So it's kind of fun because it's kind of getting outside the whole here are some retail case studies and here's some media case studies and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just like how we use the web. It's so integrated now into just everything we do. Like, I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit that my phone is just always in my pocket. And when it's not, it's probably because I'm using my iPad or something. Like I'm never just watching TV, for example. So just with this integration, it's like asking yourself, well, if this thing is happening here, like the Super Bowl, mm-hmm. And I have to admit, I'm not a football person at all. I'm going to play my Canadian card here. We have other sports, and so if somebody's watching this this big game, well, what else are they doing? And if they're doing these other things online, do they care about performance? So just sort of seeing like how these lines blur between all of our different behaviors. And so what we do a lot of around big events is we tap Harris Interactive to do Harris polls for us. So it's not our research, although it is original research. And they just survey thousands of people and just ask them these questions. And it's fun because we can just think, well, what do we want to know? So this is actually part of a much bigger poll where we just wanted to know how people, how they'd be multitasking and what they would be doing. And so like we found that, almost 60% of them said they would be watching the game, on their TV, laptop, or mobile device. And about half of them would be researching game scores and player stats during the game. So that's kind of interesting. And about 42% of them said that they would be, at some point during the game on social media, on fan sites, something like that, just cheerleading. And that about a third of them said that they would be following players on social media and just sort of like maybe cheering them on via social media. And then this was one of my favorites, was 17% of them said that they would be using the internet to trash talk other teams. I was actually surprised that wasn't higher. So I suspect that number actually went up on game day.
Yeah.
So I just thought just really interesting. So if you are a site owner, just thinking about, well, will all of these sites be functional? Can they support that level of traffic that might be coming to them? And will they just let people do these things that they expect to be able to do seamlessly? And we have something at SOASTA that we developed called the Consumer Performance Index, and anybody can go and use it. It's just consumerperformanceindex.com. And what you can do is it takes all this HTTP archive data, so that's publicly available, synthetic test data, and it pulls all that in. So I think it's the HTTP archive draws from like 500,000 or so of the most popular sites in the world. So all that data is pulled in on a regular basis, and then we take that load time data and we correlate that against this massive archive that we have of real user data for sites in different verticals. So retail, but then breaking it down into subgroups within retail, media, and so on. And we can, by looking at how people engaged with sites in real that we've tracked using RUM data, real user measurement data, we can extrapolate a lot about what the speed of the sites that's measured via the HTTP archive, how engaging those sites are to visitors. Does that make sense? Stop me if I need to explain it again.
I think I need it one more time. I think so basically, okay. So what's the consumer performance index data? So you said synthetic data. You lost me at synthetic data.
Okay.
What is synthetic data?
So synthetic performance data it comes from web page test. So web page test is a synthetic measurement tool it's really awesome. It's free. It's just webpagetest.org. Anybody can use it. Okay. And you pop in the simplest way to use it is to pop in your URL and just submit, and the default settings will tell you the synthetic load times, which tend to be a little bit slower than times that we get in real user monitoring, but they're pretty close. They're definitely, it's a worthy metric. And it will tell you, among other things, what the synthetic load time is for that page. And you can test any page on the internet, not just your own pages. It will tell you how many resources are on that page, what types of resources they are. It'll give you a nice waterfall diagram so you can see how those resources render on the page. And it'll tell you, what the total weight of that page is. So lots of good stuff in there. Right. And so the HTTP archive takes web page test data. It takes this 500,000 or so sites as ranked by Alexa, runs them through the HTTP archive, grabs all those synthetic numbers, and pulls it. And so anybody can use, it's HTTP archive I'm embarrassed that I can't remember. Let me see. Okay. Now I have to. .org, httparchive.org. Right. And you can look at historical data going all the way back to 2011 for all the sites, or for the top 1,000, or even for the top 100. And it's really neat. It just lets you slice and dice this page data in a lot of really cool ways. And so what the Consumer Performance Index does is it takes all that synthetic data, and it allows you to search for all the sites that are crawled by the HTTP archive. But it takes a particular site's data and it correlates that with our real user monitoring data. So, for example, if you were to look at the Consumer Performance Index, we call it CPI score, for say Amazon on via our tool. Amazon isn't a customer of ours because they do all the real user monitoring in-house, so we don't have actually any visibility into their RUM data, but we can take their synthetic score via HTTP archive, and we can look at retail sites and see, well, okay, with this huge cohort of retail sites that we are measuring, where we know that pages that the median page load for this group of sites correlates to a certain level of engagement. So the engagement in this case is, oh God, you think I would remember this, is a bounce rate. We can then say that if your site, looking at these two things, we can say that, well, if the median bounce rate for sites that were X fast, they say they rendered in 6 seconds, and your site also renders in 6 seconds, then we can assign you a CPI score based on that. Oh, wow. Does that make more sense?
Right. So, and then in the CPI index, I can just go, that number is already assigned. I can just pull up Amazon and pull up their number. Is that right?
It's in there. So we refresh our data every month. Nice. When the HTTP archive is refreshed, and so it's always what we do is reflecting what they have. So If you want to really a better explanation of how the CPI index works, we actually wrote a blog post about it.
Okay.
Or you can just run the site through, you can just run any URL through consumerperformanceindex.com.
Right.
And on the results page, it'll say, how is it measured? And it will give you a much more concise, which I should have just read to you.
No, it's great. No,
concise version of this.
No, you're doing great. Yeah, so I just plugged in Amazon.com because we talked about it, not that we're beating up on it or anything like that. So it's got a score of 79 out of 100.
Yeah.
And I can just preview the reports.
Yes. So you can. So the report is actually it's more of recommendations for things you can do to improve your render time. And it kind of comes with the score attached. One thing that I want to really emphasize when we're doing this scoring is it's based on an absolute scale of 0 to 100. 79 doesn't mean like, woohoo, I got a 79. So I just want to be really clear about the optics of what a score like that is. It's actually, it's okay, but it could definitely be better. So in an ideal world, you'd actually want to be like a kind of a 95 or more, or 90, 95 or more. I mean, Amazon, they're obviously doing all right. So
I guess, whatever, I guess 79, whatever, Amazon. Jeez.
Well, they used to be faster, at least according to synthetic measurements. So so it's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like you said, we don't know what their internals are, and they have a different.
Exactly.
They have their own data. So it's like, we got to slow things down. We got it.
Exactly. You just don't know, right? Like every site's different. So I wouldn't even want to presume to know. Like so when somebody goes to get their CPI score, I would want them to look at that metric alongside with a bunch of other things. So there's no single, I mean, we talk about the unicorn metric at SOASTA. There's no unicorn metric that just tells you everything. Every metric tells you something different.
Right. Yeah. There was no silver bullet or no magic thing. Like, okay.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
So, but yeah, so you recently spoke at RWD Summit. Speaking of things I forgot about yesterday. That was actually yesterday, right? And
it feels like longer ago. So much has happened since then.
Yeah, exactly. Survived so many April Fool's jokes. So.
Oh God.
But yeah, so we're recording this on April Fool's in case anyone. which and the internet being what it is, it's kind of hard to deal with this. So but yeah, your presentation was about mobile and performance and stuff like that. So I wanted to just follow up on a few things about it, but and just ask you, some of the key things that you answered in your talk, and see if it's okay if I just ask you, who's using mobile now these days.
So it's interesting. Like, I've seen so many articles in the past year and a half about millennials and mobile that it gets a little bit galling, because I'm far from being a millennial, and I use mobile all the time. So I think that there was a path that at least the tech media were going down, which is very catchword, buzzword, oriented, which is mobile, millennials, like you need to design for these people. And you should definitely design for millennials and optimize for millennials, but really you should optimize for everybody. So one of the stats that I mentioned yesterday is that in the United States, 92% of adults have a cell phone. And there's another stat that I didn't mention because it's a little bit older, and I think I actually used it when I did the State of the Union last year. But at the time, something like 3 out of 4 people worldwide. It was projected thing that 3 or 4 people worldwide were going to be on mobile by like 2020 or something like that. So this idea that there's like a particular mobile demographic is something that I want to really, I would love to start hearing put to rest. One of the other stats that I mentioned yesterday was just the fact that so many people are kind of aging into this 46 to 55 demographic. That's the fastest growing mobile using demographic, and it's just because it's people like me and my peers that are all kind of aging into it. So we need to stop thinking about that as being like, oh, this is the seniors category and they don't use mobile or anything like that. Like it's just all being, and one of the other stats too, actually, I'm just remembering, was that 1 out of 4 purchases made on a mobile device is made by somebody over the age of 55. So that's really, really interesting to me. So you kind of have this one stat, which is like 81% of millennials use mobile primarily to shop, but then you've got this stat at the other end of the spectrum, which is, well, older people are completing transactions there as well. So, and there's some older usability research that I think is really interesting around how different age groups use the internet. And kind of by now, I think that the older cohort of this is probably in the kind of 65 plus category. But psychologically, according to this Nielsen Norman study, if you're older, if you're in the 65 and plus age group, you are more likely to want to be patient with how a page renders. But actually, the slower a page is, the more it actually just messes you up at a cognitive level. And that kind of makes sense, right? Like, I mean, as we get older, after the age of 25, your memory degrades like every year, and it kind of gets noticeable at certain sort of key ages in your life. So it makes sense that just from a pure cognitive load perspective, making pages slower for people who are willing to wait is really bad for them. And we know that even a person is ostensibly willing to wait, and they've sort of established themselves as being that kind of person. If, as a retailer, for example, you want people not just to come onto your site, complete the transaction, and leave, which is, anybody can do that, no matter how poor their memory is. Like, I can remember why I came to a site. What you might lose track of as that older user who is more affected at a cognitive level by slow page loads is flipping through pages, browsing. You're just less likely to browse. You just kind of want to get in, you want to get out. And so that kind of add to cart function, you can really kind of shoot yourself in the foot there with that demographic. A little bit of this is me extrapolating based on a bunch of different bits of research, but it's, it feels truthful enough, and I'll just play the April Fool's Day card if it ends up being total nonsense.
Well, also read a stat that there's going to be more that senior citizens, I guess, or seasoned citizens, as old people. Old people over 55, 65, there are kids under 5 pretty soon, in 5 years or so. So at least I think it's 5 years or so. I'll find that graphic or not. So there's definitely going to be a lot, it's not just millennials, like you said, it could be using just mobile devices. So yeah, I definitely see that. Okay.
Totally, cool. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that there's so many people are just going straight to smartphones. Like a lot of people, if it might be that if you're not a knowledge worker or a tech worker, you might never have a laptop or a desktop computer.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. For me,
it's weird though. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's pretty sweet having a laptop, I want to say, but get this email thing you could do. It's a lot easier. I don't know.
Yeah.
You could surf the web better. I don't know. But yeah. So I guess that's where people they just see millennials on a phone. Maybe I'm just throwing this out there but they don't see them on a laptop, a lot of times. So
yeah.
That's kind of that knowledge right there. But
well, I think it's also, there's some interesting stuff around like what different demographics consider acceptable behavior with mobile.
Yeah. So that's a great question. Let me. Can you answer that question? Because my niece, they're growing up, and my nieces and nephews, they're growing up with tablets, and that's in which is awesome because they didn't exist when I was growing up, which is dinosaur age too. But but now they're they're okay. They assume tablets are a thing. There'll never be a world without an internet connected tablet, except when they walk out of the house and there's no Wi-Fi. But so what does that mean? For the younger generation, in terms of mobile performance. So.
Yeah, it's so it's interesting. Like there's a few. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to unpack in that. Like, so one thing is just like just the tablet thing, for example. The what I think people can easily forget, and I have a bit of insight into looking at this because I look at a lot of real user data, is that tablet performance generally sucks. And the reason for, like, even compared to smartphone performance, when I look at median load times for specific sites, tablet is, you know, on median is always like, it's like you have desktop, you have smartphone, and then you have tablet, you know, in terms of slowness. And that's because everybody's using old tablets. You know, people just don't replace their tablets the way they replace their phone. And your desktop is always going to be, you know, fairly robust unless you're getting pretty creaky with like an 8-year-old one. But just as like to illustrate, like my tablet is 4 years old and it sucks. You know, it's so slow. It's just like, you know, it's you know, very few people would use a 4-year-old phone, or at least very few people that I know, but lots of people use 4-year-old tablets or even older. And so, but to think that demographic isn't an important demographic and that you need to do something to mitigate the experience for them. And it's a really tricky demographic too, because they expect desktop levels of performance.
Yeah.
And they expect a desktop-like experience. And yet they're using just the crappiest thing you could be using right now. Right. So it's so that's one aspect right there.
Okay. Yeah, that explains it. Yeah, that's a good rationale, because I just upgraded my iPad, but it took me forever to upgrade it because I wasn't really happy with what was out there on the market to replace it, and then I didn't really. But I'm usually, at the time too, I was like, you know, just replacing the smartphone every year or every other year, and those are getting better and better all the time, faster and faster. So
yeah, so and I use my phone now way more than I use my tablet. Like for the things I used to do on my tablet, I do on my phone now.
Yeah, which is also another thing I've noticed with my friends, is that, you know, they don't use their tablets, but I love my tablet. So, but I just, I don't know.
Well, and I think there's so many cool things that are being built for tablets that are like, really, the tablet is the best way to consume certain types of content, like certain games, like magazines. Like you can get pretty much any magazine in tablet format now, like through like Texture. Next Issue is now called Texture. So things like that. So I would hate to see people think, oh, suddenly tablets don't matter, when I think in a lot of ways tablets are really finding their niche.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be like a big like, you know, pep rally for tablets, but but I will say, like, the Apple Pencil is really, I just got it, and I just like, it's probably the first stylus. I hate saying the word stylus when I talk about the Apple Pencil too, but it's like it has the weight of a pencil in my hand, and when I use the apps, it just flows very well. And you know, I pretty much bought every stylus, you know, from you know, that you think of for drawing and styling. It's the first one that's like, yeah, I could see working with this on a tablet, and I'm not really an illustrator, but I do need to draw boxes and arrows for layouts and for
cool.
stuff too. So yeah, so I've enjoyed it, and I could see myself working with an iPad, and more so than I have in the past. So.
Well, it's funny, right? It just goes to show. I mean, I remember it was a year or 2 years ago, there was some article in one of the big tech publications that was just saying, oh, tablets are dead. Like, it was, and everybody jumped all over that. Like, a lot of people were agreeing with it, and a lot of people not agreeing with it. And I don't think you should ever rule anything out. I mean, iPods and smartphones are basically glorified Palm Pilots and Apple Newtons, you know, and they just found the right time, and they had just the right amount of like apps, like just the apps and use cases and everything like that. So yeah, I think that this is where, again, you have to really keep your eyes open.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, I still had time to digest the Apple announcements though, but you know, they embraced the smallness factor too. So like they had the iPad Pro, which is like this huge honking device, and now they have the Apple, the iPhone, you know, 6s, whatever, like are huge monolith phones. Like here, I got mine. Here, I just hold it up right here. So like I'm 6'7", and I love this phone. But if I give it to like someone else, it's like it's a tablet to them. So it's and so Apple releases all these small iPhones and small iPad Pros. So you know, it's maybe they see something that it's better to go small instead of going large. So, but yeah, okay, cool. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that people expected that tablets are dead, but they're not terribly so.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I see that. Okay. And I guess a big question here is, what are the biggest performance issues that you see that are out there that that the companies have?
So one of the things, so there's a companion to the HTTP archive, which is the mobile HTTP archive, which crawls pages that are via web page tests, mobile test. So it's not to say that it's only measuring mobile sites or mobile optimized sites. It's measuring like all sites that are visited by anybody using a mobile device. So it's just measuring what the user experience would be for mobile. And what was interesting to me about that is that it just shows, if you look at actually I haven't looked at the mobile HTTP archive, I think in a couple of months, but the last time I looked, something like 20% of pages had more than 100 resources. So you think about that. Just think about the complexity of that. Like, it's not even just that they're fat pages. And that was one of the other things, was that the average page was over a megabyte in size, which is pretty crazy when you think about the fact that, like, in 2000 and I don't know, early 2000s or early 2010s, sorry, the average page is about a third, a quarter that size,
right.
That was served to mobile. But you have these 100 assets, and just the complexity of it, where just a few years ago, we thought it was a big deal that the number of hosts hosting content that your pages are pulling from was like 7. Like 7 was amazing. Like, oh my God, I can't believe the content's coming from 7 different places. And now, I see sites that have 50 or 60 different hosts or more. So, and all the, just so many third parties out there, and each one of them representing a potential point of failure is something that's really huge. And failure, it means a lot of things. It's not just like, oh, it's going to crash your site. It's is it slow? Is it having a slow day? Are they taking it? Are they changing it or making some kind of change on a day that's really important to your business? That happened to a customer of ours, Nordstrom, where they had not told one of the third-party providers that, oh yeah, by the way, we have this massive sale once a year. It's this really, really big deal. That was the day the third-party provider made changes to to the script, and it just blew up for Nordstrom. And now they've actually built into their whole engineering and testing process, letting all the third-party providers know, this is, we've got this event happening, please let us know. So that sort of thing. So probably third parties. Things like custom fonts, custom fonts are awesome. Branding is super important, and I would be the first person to agree with the fact that if you have a major brand, you need to, that's a big part of how you sell yourself online, and your font is a big part of your brand. So, but there are ways to do it that are smart and ways to do it that are not so smart. So, like externally hosted fonts, problem. I've seen sites where the font, the custom font was hosted externally, and it wasn't working for whatever reason, and you see the waterfall, just a long red bar as nothing is rendering on the page, because it's blocking the rest of the page from rendering, and then it doesn't even render. Like, it ends up finally defaulting to whatever the default font is, and then the rest of the page loads. Right. So things like that, and that was a major retail site. I'm not going to say which one, but so
is it Target? You could say it's Target.
No, it's not Target. No, it was another site. I don't even know if it was a SOASTA customer. So it was probably somebody else. I'm going to say that. So things like that, and all it takes is just one thing, just one little tiny script.
Yeah, and that's Rebecca Murphy. She made a point of, she works with JavaScript. She's a big JavaScript person. She's also kind of a manager role right now, if I remember correctly. But yeah, one of the things that she says, like when she does like JavaScript apps and stuff like that, is that she doesn't rely on third-party hosting of scripts anymore. Like even if it's jQuery, she's like, that's great, you can actually bring that in and host it yourself and make it part of your build and say it's, here's a big gigantic JavaScript file that's only one file, and put that in there, because by having that third party, it opens you up to a point of failure if that site just happens to go down, or they have a slow day. It's maybe their CDN is having a bad day or something like that. So so I definitely see that. And then fonts, we had a discussion about fonts also at our RDD summit too. But there's also like Dave Rupert's has a blog post about getting rid of fonts, as well as if you don't need it, fonts are awesome and stuff like that. But if you're gonna host third-party fonts, maybe that's not that best way. If you can get away with Verdana, if you will.
Yeah. Well, or it just be like I've seen posts where people just said, pick your battles, like find the place where you really need to use that font, and then use the defaults everywhere else. So what I really have been enjoying in the past year or so is just all the talk there's been about performance budgets. Where people are, and Ryan Ireland was on before me yesterday, and he did a great talk about that, just what a performance budget is, just the idea that you cap page size or number of assets or whatever, and then just how you manage that, and you build a culture around managing it. So it's not just a developer issue or an engineer's issue. It's like people in marketing need to know about it, people in design need to know about it. Like everybody who touches the page needs to buy into this idea that everything they do affects performance.
Right. Exactly. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's about it for me. I think it's been great. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there questions I should have asked you? I was going to just about performance. Is there something that you want to let people know about?
Well, certainly. I mean, you feel free to say no. I do have a book coming out with O'Reilly.
Oh, yes,
you want to plug that? Okay, cool.
I just found about it yesterday at the summit when you talked about it, but please mention it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So what is the title of the book? What is it about?
It is called Time is Money, The Business Value of Web Performance. It is being published by O'Reilly. It'll be out in May of this year. And what it covers is it's kind of a summary of everything that I've done over the past 7 years, sort of encapsulated in one book, which is a little bit humbling that can be done. So there's some stuff in there. It's sort of the greatest hits version of a lot of things that I've written, and some original and some new stuff in there as well, of course. Where talking about the psychology of performance. Why do we care about performance? What's why does it matter? And it's not just this like nice to have thing, but why it actually really does affect people. That's one of my favorite chapters. And then the subsequent chapters are a lot of case studies around the impact of performance on so many user experience and business metrics. I mean, one of my slogans is, I've never met a metric that wasn't affected by performance in some way. All you have to do is have it. If you look at your site and you look at all the different metrics that are available, like business and UX metrics, and you have enough data, you can find something that was affected by performance. So whether it's bounce rate or time on site or revenue or conversion or even at the back end, like bandwidth costs, things like that, things that you don't really think about, user productivity, customer retention rate. If it's something that you are making available as a service online, how well are people able to actually use it and complete tasks? So everything is affected. So it's broken down in a lot of chapters about that. So I'm very excited, as you can tell.
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, and you said like it was a free sample or right now, is that right?
Yeah, there's so O'Reilly has made a couple of chapters available for free as an ebook, and you can actually download those at soasta.io/timeismoneybook.
Okay, we'll have a link in our show notes as well. So
cool. Okay. And then the actual book will be available. It's available for pre-order right now on the O'Reilly site, but it'll be available in March.
Oh, that's awesome. One, congratulations.
Thank you.
Is this an animal book? Do you have an animal?
No, I'm not
Oh.
in the. I'm not because I'm not. It's not a developer book.
Oh,
It's so the audience for this is. I kind of like envision it as two audiences. The way I envision everything that I write. So I
okay.
think of there being like a business and marketing site owner, non-technical person who just wants to understand why does this matter, and then I think of there being like a performance engineer, developer person who knows performance matters and is beating their head against the wall and just wants something that they can give their boss or other people on their team to say like, here's why we need to like actually focus more resources on it.
Oh, that is awesome. That's such a great. As someone who's written like 10 plus books, I think that's an awesome book. I can't wait. Can't wait to read it. That's
Thanks.
such a great idea. I love the concept. I can't wait to read it. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. We usually ask what you're passionate about or what you're looking for in the future. So you could say it's performance, and I would totally believe you. So, but if there's something else, just let me know. Let us know.
Gosh, I have to think about this for a second. There's a few things. I mean, I actually I read a lot. So oh God. But right now, actually, so my house is being renovated. So what I'm passionate about is it being done. I'm really excited about that. And you can hear the drilling right now. Maybe when the drilling ends in a few weeks, it'll be an exciting day. But no, I read a lot of fiction and nonfiction and some really cool stuff. And if I was going to give a shout out maybe to a book or a pair of books that I've read lately, it would be the You Are Not So Smart and You Are Not So Smart and You Are Now Less Dumb. It's a pair of books kind of based on the You Are Not So Smart podcast that are just all about all the different ways that we fool ourselves
Nice.
at a cognitive level, just like our many biases, and it just like lays them bare and makes you question everything you've ever thought you knew. It's a really, really good pair of books. Definitely recommend them.
Cool. Awesome. We'll put those in the show notes as well.
Right,
cool.
Excellent.
And then how can people find you on the internet?
I'm on Twitter at Tam Everts, TAMEVERTS. I blog at performancebeacon.com, and I also co-curate with Tim Cadlick, who is awesome performance expert at Akamai. We co-curate WPO Stats, which is kind of a repository of performance-related case studies.
Oh yes, which is awesome. It's also a great site. So yes.
Yeah, Tim gets the credit for coming up with the idea. I'm kind of like the tag along who's like, okay, well, I know there are some case studies we could add. So yeah, I have some props to Tim.
Yeah, and I guess also the goal of that site is also just to showcase how important performance is with using stats and case
exactly.
So,
So if anyone knows that, and if anyone has a case study that's like very data driven, we're always adding to it, so they can just pop us a note. It's through GitHub, and we will add it to the site.
Cool, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Tammy. And hope
thanks
to talk
so
to you
much,
soon.
Chris. Yeah, okay. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.